Okay, Erev Tov, everyone. We continue in the Rambam. In the Rambam La'am, we're on page Lamed,
Yes.
section Dalet.
Correct.
In the Sefiria, it is section 8.10.
Oh,
That's what we have over there, right over there. See, 8:10.
Just easier for this, it's easier to follow on there.
Okay, then
So
let's do it. Just keep reminding me if I forget to scroll because I'm looking over here. I have to have 4 eyes,
4 eyes.
but I only have 2, so it's going to be a
Wait,
little
look at your
challenge.
glasses.
Okay, we're now up to Rabbi Yehuda Nossi after the Rambam said all the great accolades about Rabbi Yehuda Nossi, so we pick it up at this point. V'kasher kol al hadeos v'hadvorim. So after Rabbi Yehuda Nossi gathered up all the opinions and all the statements, Heichel l'chaber haMishne. He began to author or edit the Mishne. Okay, so clearly the Mishnayos is primarily an explanation of the written law. The Torah is the written law. So now we have, the explanations of the written law. She koleles perush kol hamitzvos. It incorporates the explanation of all the mitzvahs, haksuvas b'Torah, that are written in the Torah. Mayhem, some of them are kabbalas mekubelas mipi Moshe. Some are traditions that we received from Moshe l'shalom. And that statement, we could say is we could say a simple statement. When Moshe, remember we said Hashem told him what it says in the Chumash, and he explained what he meant and explained every detail. That's one thing. And including that is ideas that we can bring out through logic. And there's no machlokas. And also included, he wrote Deos opinion shenafla b'machlokas, that there fell machlokasim bein shtei asfaros, between 2 sides of logic. Because of asam b'machlokosem, and he writes them in their arguments. Ploni omer kach, so and so says this. Uploni omer kach, and so says this. Now my text says va'afilu, and here says ve'ilu. Okay, same idea. Even if one person is arguing with the masses, still nichtavim divrei ha'echad v'divrei harabim. We write the opinion of the individual and the opinion of the many. And these things are very useful. And they will be listed in the Mishnah of Edios, and I will talk more about them in his commentary on the Mishnah, which he's not going to talk about in this introduction. Okay, okay. And I will mention them later on in our words. But not until I talk about a very important idea that has to be explained beforehand. Okay, before we continue, there is a subtlety over here that I don't know if we're picking up the nuance over here, but from the Rambam, it appears that he's saying that Rabbi Yehuda Nossi wrote the Mishnah. Okay, there is a great debate amongst the Gaonim and others exactly what happened over here. Okay, did Rabbi Yehuda Nossi write it down, or did he just collate it verbally and put it in an organized structure? This is the question. Okay.
So we're talking about, was he an editor or a writer? Is that what you're saying?
In other words, we have this Torah. Let me explain. We got all this information. Okay, and all we got is Chamisha Chumsha Torah. That's all we got. Now there's got to be some way of organizing these laws. You just can't, throw a law here, throw a law there, throw a law there. He's going to discuss this all in a few days, where he starts off with the Shishe Sidrei Mishnah, where he takes all the laws of agriculture, he puts it into Zraim, and then he makes Mesechtas and Parakim and this and that. So forget about writing anything, just, what's the word I'm looking for? Compiling, very good. Compiling in an order that makes sense.
Yeah.
That itself.
You can't do it verbally.
No, yes, you can. Yeah, we can't. He could. These guys had minds, photographic minds. All right. And we don't realize how much the mind is capable of doing. We're so weak compared to Rabbi Yehuda Nossi's time. These guys got minds, they could hold the whole thing in their head. And better than that, they can give it over to others and they hold the whole thing in their head. Okay, so that's so that this is the compilation of all the halachas in a certain arrangement. So now the question is, did Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Nossi, write it down or just formulate it? And then later it became written in the times of Rabbanan Savuroi, or maybe later than that. It's a whole discussion, a lot of scholarly debate. And it seems that the majority opinion says that certainly this was all given over, even after Yehuda Nasi formulated it, it was given over orally until they mamish remembered it. But like in the Rosh Yeshivas, they had their little notes. We call Megillas Sesarim.
Yes.
Like they had their own scrolls, private, to make sure that that to be somebody, few people who would remember it all. When the yeshivas grew and the students, when the persecutions got worse and the yeshivas started to disband it, and it was very great sakana that it would be totally forgotten, then they mamish wrote it and publicized it in the written view. So as much as there is a scholarly debate on the topic, it seems that, again, I can't tell you 100% for sure, but it seems most scholars of the opinion that it was orally ordered the way it was. People were just trained to memorize it. Certain people would write it down, so to speak, for safekeeping, so that he'd have a version, another would have a version, and they'd know in case anything would happen. And then as time marched on and things got much worse, that's when we had to really commit to writing, otherwise we wouldn't be able to.
Who did the writing then? Was it after Rabbi's time? Like,
Yeah, oh yeah, Rabbanan
I
Savuroi, like maybe 600, 700s,
thought
whatever.
we credit him for taking the
Nice, so
initiative
he-
to write it down.
Again, he is credited, forget about the writing, just the organizational structure. That was incredible, that was profound, because once you have a structure, you could even begin to maybe memorize it. If he actually wrote it or not, that is the debate. That is the scholarly debate. Did he write it down? Certainly whatever was written down, when it was written down by him or by scholars a few centuries later, was exactly what he had organized with everybody as well. So that's for sure. Okay, and the main point is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi collated all the information, all the corpus of Torah that was at least 1,000 years from Sinai, give or take.
Well,
That's a lot of Torah.
more than that. It was 2448 was Torah.
2448. The structure was 3338, first temple, 3, and then 490, so 3828. So about 1,400 years. Or
Yeah.
so, or maybe a little more, 1,500 years.
1,500 years. I think.
So 1,500 years of Torah
That's a lot.
advancement. It was everything that Moshe gave, and then there would be subsequent new scenarios that came up and new applications as they went into Eretz Yisrael.
Well, you had Hillel and Shammai, you had all
Yeah.
the groups beforehand.
all that stuff. So anyway, and then there was Machlokasim because they were debating logic and this and
Yeah.
that. So the main thing was the collating and formulating it. If it was committed to writing then or later, it doesn't really matter, because Lamaisa, we have it written down and it was based on how we organized it.
But after he organized it, there were people who did write it down for the Rosh Yeshivas.
Yes, there was some private copies
Right.
being
were
done, like
done.
in safekeeping,
Right.
so to speak. Yeah,
I'd like to go back to the Machloket issue.
yeah. He hasn't begun to discuss it yet.
Because I have two thoughts. One is,
Okay,
if we didn't have Machlokets, we would have siyums every 6 months of the Gemara, because it's like most of the Gemara is Machloket. And also, I think what people also thank the Gemara for, the Machloket is what sharpened the mind. Without the Machlokets, that's what actually made the Jewish mind so sharp, is being able to understand it and go back and forth. So I'm saying they played a vital role in the Gemara of being able to sort of.
we're not even up to the Gemara yet, but okay.
Well, I hear what you're saying, you can debate
I'm not arguing the point. But we're not even up to Gemara. We're just breaking through the Mishnah now. The main point of the Rambam is to try to prove the validity of the oral law. That's the main point of this Hakdama. And he's trying to show you, first of all, we have an unbroken chain of Masara. He's laying down how things fit into the Torah. And probably tomorrow he's going to divide it, show us the 5 divisions of this Torah, maybe in 2 days. So right now, all we want to know is, so where did it change from Torah to Mishnah? Like what, we have Torah, all of a sudden it's Mishnah. So what happened in between? So he's saying, well, when Moshe taught it to us, Hashem explained in every halacha the way it's meant to do the mitzvah properly, right? That's what we know. And that was not written down at all, but everybody knew about this. There was no discussion. Everybody agreed to that. Then there would be this corpus of new situations that God did not discuss because it didn't come up. And that would be where there would be debates and they would vote on it and decide and this and that. And then it got to a point where even though there were decisions, but there's still, just like in a Supreme Court ruling, they give you the ruling and then the minority opinion, right? Because that also has some validity to the law. Now, why is that? Because, well, what's going to happen? We will see. We didn't get to this yet, but you'll be able to change laws. Let's say one Sanhedrin voted, 42 to 29, that this is the halacha. Okay. Then 200 years later, a more numerous and greater Sanhedrin reversed it. We'll see. They can. Okay. Now it's good to know what the minority opinions were, because now we see this was an opinion, but there was not enough intellectual support for it. So therefore, we always write the minority opinion, just like you do in the Supreme Court or any court, because we have to understand what there is certain logics that may be employed later on.
So there are generational boundaries where you can't.
We're going to talk all about that. It's all in the safer of it.
Don't we see the Mishnah as a cryptic, short version of the law, and then it's up to us to expand on it to find out exactly.
Well, in the Mishnah,
So-
they knew
so
exactly.
it have to come up from somewhere.
The Mishnah knew exactly what they were talking about. Remember, they had to, even if they're going to write it, or even if it is for memory, people involved in memory, they don't write every single detail down. They write the main points, and that's a trigger to have you remember what it's talking about. So that's the same thing, whether we write it or not, we eventually did write it, but you want to write it as little as possible, because already you're using a leniency to write it down, right? And more than that, if you want to be able to remember things, less is better in terms of memory. So therefore, and that's the Gemara then discusses, well, what did this mean?
That's what I'm saying. That's part of the way the law became transformed into a Mishnah, because they had to put it into a form that people could remember, and then eventually wrote it down.
Yes. Okay, anyway, so,
Sorry, I got one question.
yes, sir.
I don't fully understand the difference between Mishnah, Torah B'Shalom Peh, and Torah L'Moshe.
Okay, well, if we'll continue, he will tell us. There's a lot to talk about, and it's all coming up over here. Okay, so we're up to, I'll get back here by the 12. We'll start again. But after one important point that I feel important to mention, a person can say, if this Mishnayos is a commentary on the Torah as we have established, Moshe, and we received this from Moshe, as the Ray told us in their words, as the quote, the famous Gemara says, the entire Torah was said its general rules and its detailed rules and all the details at Sinai. Here comes the question. So what does it mean with a special category of halacha Moshe Sinai? We know there's something called halacha Moshe Sinai. So what's halacha Moshe Sinai? Isn't everything halacha Moshe Sinai? But we see there's something has a separate category of that. So what does that mean?
There's no other answer.
No, he's going to answer it now. So this is a primary thing. We must stand on this foundation to understand this clear. For who? And this is as
follows. Shahaperushim amikubuli mipi Moshe. The explanations that we received from Moshe, as we've already said their words, the Gemara, there's no machlokas at all. It's going to give examples. From the time of Moshe until now, we found no argument at all. From Moshe until Ravashi. And Ravashi authored the Gemara. Okay? You don't find an argument with the rabbis on fundamental principles of the main basic explanation of mitzvahs. He's going to give examples now. Sheyomar echad. If one person would say, for example, Hamotzi ein chavero. Okay, if someone pokes out a guy's eyes, okay, nobody ever said, besides the Sadducees, but Yotzias Eno, take his eye out. Even though it says ayin b'ayin, an eye for an eye. There was no machlokes at all. And V'yomer Sheni, and the other guy says, no, ain't ela kofer. It's just money. Bilvad shechaglos you have to give. There was never, ever a machlokes in that pshat. Moshe Rabbeinu taught us the Torah. He says, it says in the Torah this and this. This is what God told me it means. There was never a machlokes on that point. It's going to give a few examples now. Never machlokes in the following example. And we just did this for any of you who are in the Daf Yomi last week, trying to understand where do we have the esrog in the Torah. You don't have it anywhere specifically. It says pre-eitz hador, right. The fruit of a tree that's beautiful. At sheyomer echad, what are you going to say? That one guy decides to say shu esrog, it's an esrog. V'yomacher, another guy says shu chabushim, it's quinces, or rimonim, or figs, also something else. We never had machlokas on that. Everybody knew it's an esrog. Finished. Goodbye. When the wording of the Torah said eight avos, a tree that's kind of bundled, we knew shadas, it's the willow. Never machlokas. We never found a machlokas in the words of the text. Okay. Where it says you even more. But Katzol says kapo, chop off her hand. That we know, shahu kofer, it's money. I'm giving more. He's giving a lot of examples. And how about a bas kohen that is immoral? And we know it's not just a regular bas kohen. It says no machlokas when the pasuk says ubas ish kohen kiseichol ishlos. The daughter of a kohen, if she begins to be immoral, but eish tisaref, she'll be burnt to a crisp. Shizu agzera elano leagues her so. Ella imtia ashes ish. No, even though it doesn't say it in the Torah, she has to be an ashes ish, a married woman, and not a single girl. Right. No machlokes about that either. V'chein gzeras hakosav, and also what was decided benara ashalonsa besulim, a woman who gets married as a nara that the husband claims she's not a virgin. She is skalu, that she's stoned. There's no machlokas from Moshe's time until now, but who we're talking about, except she had to be a married woman. Witnesses testified after she got the Kiddushin. She had snus when there were witnesses and a warning. And similarly with that, the mitzvahs in the mitzvahs, there's no machlokas at all. Shekulan perushim mekubalim mipi Moshe. They were all explained very clearly from Moshe, valeim valdomeim, and on things like this and similar to that. That's what the Gemara meant. Kol ha'toira nemru klaloseim repotoseim v'titugev Sinai. All the details, the generalities, and the details were said to Moshe at Sinai. That was clear. Okay, so that is the first thing we're saying. Whatever Moshe told, this is not the Lach Moshe Sinai now. No. Because there's a text to anchor all the comments on. There's a text that says you take a pre-eitz hador. So it's not a question. You have to take a pre-eitz hador. And Moshe told us, as he taught us Torah, he said, you know what Hashem meant when he wrote Create Sador? He meant an esrog, period. No, everything he just listed the last 5 minutes is all Moshe explained to us, and this is the klolos and the pratos. Now,
Well, everything in the Torah, whether it's come laws of kashrut, everything, does it all fall into this one category?
not all.
Not all.
This is one very big category. We have to get to halacha. There's going to be 5 categories. This is only the first one. Okay. Even though they're accepted so machlokas, harehi mechachmas haTorah hanasuna lanu. Okay, but it is part of the Torah that is given to us through the 13 attributes. The new part now. Shenucha lahotzi memenu Elohai perushim miderech asfaras vasmachtas varayas ramosem asun b'mikra. We can find, even though we know what Moshe said, but we were given some tools and some wisdom to try to not figure out where Moshe got it out from, but where Hashem left us room to figure out where it's hinted to, or it could be a reliance or a proof or this and that, as he's going to explain in a minute, to explain what he's just saying. In other words, Moshe says, creates order is an esrog. Done. Now, you're going to see in a minute, you'll learn Maseches Sukkah, you could be misled. The Gemara says, how do you know it's an esrog?
Because the fruit tastes
And now,
like the
and
tree.
now 3 or 4 rabbis give 3 or 4
Fruit tastes
different
like the tree.
answers. So you think, oh, it's a machlokes. No, there was no machlokes. Everybody knew from day one it was an esrog. What are they asking? But everything's got to be hinted somewhere in the Torah. Nobody would argue for a minute. They only have to take an esrog, and they knew exactly what the esrog looked like, exactly what kind of tree, what kind of branch. It was clear what an esrog was. But they went up. But where could we find a hint to it in the Torah? If we find it or not doesn't matter. But just for our own edification, lahagdul Torah v'yadir, so that everything has to be hinted into the Torah. So where is it hinted to? So you could have a machlokes as to what the hint is, but it doesn't matter. There could be a million hints, but it's not going to change the halacha. That's what he's going to say. Ukeshetira. Let me just finish this. Ukeshetira osam v'talmud mind, when you can see in the Torah that they're going expecting and going in depth. V'cholking zelzeh b'marecha sa'iyun, and they're arguing when we're dealing with the different of opinions of saying certain things about it. They're being proofs to one of their explanations. Like it says by pre-8 Hador. That's all it says. So do you think it means the Gemara is suggesting how do we know it's an esrog? Maybe it's a pomegranate. Maybe it's a quince. That never entered the Gemara's mind at all. You'd think it what it meant. Actually, and then they make a proof. For example, it says pre-eitz hador. So they say Amru eitz shitam eitzo upir yasham, that the taste of the tree, the bark, and the fruit are the same. That's
Where did it say that?
Gemara. Gemara Sukkah.
Why does the Gemara say that?
That's from
The
Breshit.
Gemara.
Why do they say
So
that?
that's what I'm trying to explain. So don't misunderstand the Gemara and say, oh, now that we got the proof, now we know that it's an esrog. And we never knew it was an esrog until this minute. That for centuries they were debating what is a pre-eitz hadar. Nothing doing. Moshe told them from day one, it's an esrog. You know what? Hashem told me. Finished.
So that's
Now,
not the-
guess what? We've given you some intelligence. We've given a Torah. If you'd like to try to figure a hint to it, you're more than welcome. And that can be your contribution to a subsidiary understanding of Torah, which could even be true, but never was on the table to discuss if it's an esrog or something else. You want to find where is it into, and if we couldn't find it, we'd still say it's an esrog. And this is not halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Why?
That's the question.
Because we'll see in a minute what halacha Moshe Sinai is relating to something. There's no text to support it,
I don't-
period.
No.
There's not even a hint to it.
But esrog, there is. It says pre-eitz hador, which says you must take, well, let me finish. You must take a fruit. There's no question you have to take a fruit. We're not pulling it out of the air. You take a fruit. God said a fruit, and God told Moshe that this fruit that the Torah is talking about is a pre-eitz hador, as opposed to the Nisuch Hamayim ceremony, the pouring of the water libation. There isn't even a hint to it in the Torah. You can't see hide or hair of anything like that. But that's also halacha l'Moshe Sinai. There's 33 halachas l'Moshe Sinai where you look in the Chumash, I don't even see a hint. Where did you think? You just pull that out of your hat? Yep, just pull it out of my hat. No, Hashem told me, even though there's nothing in the Torah to support the idea at all. That's what we mean by halacha l'Moshe Sinai. You're gonna say, I don't see anywhere. It doesn't say anything. I don't know anywhere where on Sukkot you're gonna go and do this. It doesn't say anything about this. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay,
So
that's the difference.
Maybe my memory is wrong, but I thought in the morning classes, we always said for every halakha l'Moshe Sinai, there's always a hint somewhere.
There can be a hint, but that's a very remote hint, much more remote than esrog.
This is an all.
Esrog is not a hint. The Torah says you must take a beautiful fruit. God said, take a beautiful fruit. Okay, from the text, I don't know what it means. God told Moshe in this text that you see, I'm telling you what this word means. It means an esrog. Okay, that's not how, obviously everything Hashem told
That's what
Moshe.
I said. Is it halakha
Yeah.
l'Moshe Sinai or not? I mean, am I going to swimming with this?
Okay,
This.
listen, God gave Moshe the whole Torah, but there's two aspects of it. They're both Doraisa, but one is where he writes in the Tefillin. Tefillin, it says you're supposed to put something called totafos on your head and on your arm. We know we have to put something there. Okay, so now God just says it happens to be tefillin, and it looks like this and this and this and this and this, and we hang this all on this puzzle that says you got to put something on your head. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai is, it's no less important, Hashem, but it's something that there isn't even a direct statement that you do this. Now the rabbis are going to kind of find a really remote hint that if I wasn't even, that I could say, where do you see that? Well, it's something.
But there's not fucking big Rashi remain the top. There's not a consensus.
That's not, that nobody argues that they're tefillin. Nobody argues they're black boxes with straps. Nobody argues that there's 4 parshas. Nobody argues about the other 2,500 halachas that's there. They only argue what's the order of the parshas.
And it's
Finished. Finished. That's it.
Swimming with this.
That's
I'm
it.
waiting for a question.
Why?
Okay.
So when we say, where do we find Chanukah and Purim in the Torah?
That's another thing. That's a new
That's
topic I can't get to now.
Yeah,
That's rabbinic. That's a new
rabbinic
topic.
begin-
That's another topic.
it's rabbinic
So,
combination
so
We're just dealing now
with a rice.
with what is implicit in the Torah says you must do this. Shechita. It says you got to shech. I don't know how. Hashem explained to Moshe, you take a knife and you cut it this way. That's all. And it's implicit. The text is screaming out, how do you do it, guy? So Hashem fills in the blanks. But halacha l'Moshe Sinai means there's nothing in the text that suggests to do it at all. And God said to Moshe, this is a law. And where, doesn't matter, this is the law. Now the rabbis want to go and try to find a remote hint. It's not like God saying, keep Shabbos, and now you'll figure out how to keep Shabbos. I don't even know, but he's going to give examples that when you see the examples, you'll understand. But that's the, obviously they're both from Hashem, they're both Doraisa. That's not a question over here. And there's no argument about it. The only difference in definition was the halacha, text-based, to the extent that the text says you must do X, and X has a lot of details. We don't know what the X is, but we know you got to do it. Torah says you got to do it, and we don't know the deal. So God told Moshe the details. That is
the explanation of the direct biblical text. Halacha Moshe Sinai, I don't even see a hint to it anywhere in the Torah. Hashem told the Moshe, just tell them this is the law. Now, you scholars want to try to figure a very remote hint. It's not even implicit, just a hint. You can find a hint all day long. And if you find one nice, how did you get that? Well, it's a little bit, but it's not the same thing as saying, go and put something between your eyes.
So I think that
When you hear the examples, you'll be much happier, but I can't teach you everything outside.
Another question, Paul says for the time.
Yes,
They run a tattoo. I don't know what that is.
okay,
Sarah
this is,
Sakata.
these are all, this is Yud Gimel Mida Shatar Nishim. We need to learn more information. So that without enough information, I can't,
I guess I'm getting is I think in the past we just said all those explanations are halacha Moshe Sinai. We
no.
just wrap them in together. Street fill in.
Hashem told Moshe what it meant. Obviously, Hashem told him all this at Sinai. We're just now parsing our definitions. That's what the Rambam is. He's parsing his definitions. What's called the Kabbalah we had of understanding the text versus Halacha Mishne Sinai, where there's no text to even support the idea, but it's just as valid. Hashem gave it to Moshe, but it's not directly sourced in a text. Now the rabbis, they like to find a hint to it, and even with after the hint, you say, "Oh, really? That's where you see it." Well, it's the best hint I could find. But and if without the hint, we would still do it. But Shita, for example, that says you got a shecht. Well, what is it? Well, Hashem told Moshe right then when he said that what it means. Yes, Paul.
So are we distinguishing between the fact that it's a halakha from the details that Hashem shared with Moshe at Sinai? Right. So I mean, every halakha has details that Hashem's shared with Moshe at Sinai.
Listen, even the halacha l'Moshe Sinai's are details, but the difference again is it a detail that is directly connected to a text that's screaming to have an explanation of the text? Or is it a detail that there's no text source in this, but God just wanted to tell Moshe this detail of halacha?
And that's what this definition is distinguishing between those two.
It'll work a lot better when we give more examples of this.
Yeah, so Rabbi, what would you call olam haba? Is that, because that's not in the text.
That's lost.
That's not text, right? So is that Moshe Sinai?
Is that halacha? That's a good question. But that's a whole discussion. Some say it's implicit in the text. Some say it's only hinted. It doesn't matter. For sure, Hashem told it to Moshe. Do you want it, from the Rambam's perspective, it would be a commentary on the Chumash. It'd be a commentary on the Chumash. And that's a whole discussion. That itself is a vast discussion where the rabbis want to know, where does the Torah say it? And there's a lot of places that this is what the text means. Clearly, Hashem told Moshe all about Olam Haba. He told him all about those things. That's part of Torah. And it's and then there's a discussion, exactly where we find this over here. Okay. Anyway, good place to stop. Got everybody excited. This is not a class that we're going to be sleeping through, I see.
Excited.
So
Also an hour earlier than usual.
yeah, okay, we will continue this. Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow.
A lot of questions.
Good. So we'll hopefully get time to answer them all.